So today we're going to talk about truly farm to table and how to scale that from a logistics point of view. So as we get started here, the first thing I'd like to do is actually thank D-Wave, of course, for having me here today. And of course, not just D-Wave, but the whole team behind directfood.store. So I want to thank Jill from our team, who's here in the comments and able to answer any questions you may have along the way. And of course, my mentor, Raymond Zabata, and the entire iOpen group, of course, as well. So to get started, I want to make it clear what we're talking about here. This is definitely a little bit more grassroots, I'll say, or a little bit more down to earth than some of the more technical talks here today. But hopefully this is a great example for you of how quantum can be applied to new business models and being able to scale problems that we couldn't actually scale very well before for something that is as down to earth as truly farm to table, picking up a whole bunch of food from many different farms and delivering it to many different customers. From a customer experience point of view, I'll point out that really when you land on the directfood.store website and you start shopping, it's going to seem like a pretty typical e-grocery experience, right? You're able to basically shop and browse your meats, browse your different produce, etc. But all of the food that you're taking a look at here, for the most part, is going to be directly from the local farms and come directly to your doorstep. We're talking in our first region here in the Greater Vancouver region of British Columbia, Canada. We're talking about everything from Chilliwack through Vancouver. It's sort of about 2.5 hours at the most from end to end of that delivery region here. So we're talking really super local food, and we're talking about having it be delivered to you without any warehouses or that other traditional logistics. So think about things about being able to have the bundles and being able to have different promos and all that stuff. So all those sort of shopping experiences are there that customers would expect. But when you buy a bundle, the bundle even could have products from different vendors. And we don't have these bundles pre-bundled. We're actually going to pick up the different items of that bundle on the same day from the different farms and actually deliver to all of those to your door at the same time. So as we take a look at why we do this in the first place, why would we actually sort of try and reinvent the way e-grocery works? Well, let's take a look at this particular graph here, Metrics for Success. This is just from last year in 2020 of October, actually. We can see that quality and freshness is the number one thing that consumers really cared about, okay? So when we talk about quality and freshness, how do you deliver the ultimate freshness? Well, think about our typical supply chains that we have in grocery stores today. Think about how they were disrupted during the COVID era, and think about how long it really takes that food from harvest time to actually land at your doorstep, whether you bring it there yourself or it's delivered. Everybody else, of course, is adding delivery in the e-grocery era on top of the existing supply chains, or at best they're cutting the supply chain down in half. We're actually going direct from the farm to you, and it's essentially zero supply chain. So this fresh quality really matters. It makes a big impact on the consumers. They receive handwritten notes from the farmers saying, hey, these eggs were just laid this morning, or I just picked this lettuce today or yesterday. So when you're able to have that kind of freshness and come straight to your door, of course, we're going to be able to hit that quality and freshness metric a lot more easily than other business models. Moving on then, we're going to see that in order to pull this off, there's really a lot more to it. We're going to say, okay, well, why do we even want to do this in the first place? Well, we actually start off with our core mantra of healthy people, healthy planet, healthy economy. In order to accomplish this, we're going to start out with the many-to-many delivery model that I was explaining a moment ago. But that also requires many-to-many e-commerce, where you're going to be able to shop from these different farmers in a marketplace, and you're going to be able to check out at once, only enter your credit card details once, but we want to have you buy it directly. So you have a separate credit card charge, a separate invoice from each farm directly, and they actually get paid directly too. So this is, again, a differentiation on the way that typical e-grocery works, and really speaks to the name Direct and directfood.store. We also want everything in the store to be traceable. So when we can't deal with local food and we do have to import some things, those are going to be certified organic in order to ensure that traceability. Then in order for the farmers to succeed in this new era, many of them aren't doing direct consumer sales yet. So we have to give them the education, the tools, and the support in order to empower them to succeed here. And then, of course, that leads to trust, and we're able to work together. And we always try to keep a community aspect here, pushing the farmers front and foremost. We want to be sort of behind the scenes, and if you take a look at our social media and all of that, it's always about the farmer, it's about their story, right? And of course, charity plays a big part of what we do here as well. So this allows us to accomplish our goal of people, planet, and economy all being healthy. And what we're talking about is a truly farm-to-table marketplace. Food is delivered directly from the farms and vendors to your doorstep without all the other stops, because honestly, the lowest food miles is going to be direct food, the freshest food is going to be direct food, and honestly, the most profitable food for the farmer is going to be direct food as well. So that brings me to the question of, okay, well, how does this work for the farmer? Well, honestly, directfood.store only takes a flat 30% compared to all the other options a farmer could do with their food. So think about wholesale. The farmer is going to get 40% typically, maybe even less, at best 60%. So that's a big difference when DFS is providing 70. But there are farms out there that are doing direct-to-consumer models already. They may have a roadside stand, and the farmer may think they keep 90% of the sales there, but this only works if you're on a busy road, and most farms aren't on busy roads. Otherwise, you're going to have to do a lot of marketing to try to convince people to drive to your farm for only that limited selection that you have. So it's very limited market reach. But even if you are on a busy road, just setting up the parking lot area, having that building and having it actually be staffed is going to cost you probably more than you're thinking if you're actually taking a look at the dollars. And again, it's not going to work for the majority of the farmers. So then you could have your own website, your own social media, and set up your own free delivery like we offer. But this is going to cost those farms and vendors a lot more than 30%, simply because they don't have the economies of scale and able to pooling these resources together. Because literally what we're doing, of course, is taking the money we receive from the farmers and we're pooling that into a shared delivery system and shared ongoing marketing and advertising costs. So what do customers care about? Well, let's talk about convenience. It's going to be the highest rated aspect here. And when we talk about convenience, we're talking about deliveries. We're going to really spend the rest of this talk deep diving into the delivery aspect, because that's really where the D-Wave component comes into play here. And again, the whole point of this talk is to understand how D-Wave is able to actually really empower new business models that weren't able to scale in the past. So this convenience factor means that a person who is ordering online their food from many different vendors and different farms, they want it to all arrive at the same time. And that's convenience is really critical of thinking about the fact that if you didn't have it work this way, if you ordered your eggs and your steak and your meat and potatoes and they all arrived on different days, but you wanted to eat that on Tuesday, that's not going to work very well for you. So another thing is meal prep, of course, is a very typical thing among our ideal customers. So they want to be able to have all of their food arrive on their key meal prep day of the week or the day before, so that they have all of that to actually do a meal prep. So the free delivery, we have to face it, in the Amazon era, consumers really do expect it. No one is profiting from it though without markup, primarily because, as I mentioned before, they're always adding it on top of the existing supply chains. But we can actually do it profitably with no minimum order size required. And if you think about e-grocery systems out there, that minimum order size is there for a reason. It's there for profitability. So we pull this off with our unique many-to-many delivery infrastructure. We're going to dive into more details further yet. But understand this is the zero supply chain thing that we've been talking about. We cut it out, and the way this is possible to scale is because of the quantum computing that we have researched with D-Wave. We also should actually give credit where credit is due. We only go into a new region where we have boots on the ground partners. This is critical because at the end of the day, the smartest AI and the smartest quantum computing algorithms are not going to solve the logistical things that people who are in the area and grew up in the region are just familiar with. So we are talking about solving hard problems here. Granted, this may not, this isn't really something that is difficult to wrap your head around, as some of the earlier talks may or may not have been for you. This is a typical business case, right? It's pretty simple logistics, but scaling it isn't actually easy. In fact, it's quite hard, and even getting started isn't that easy for that matter. So we're going to take a look at a really simplistic example here in order to understand how this works. So we are going to, as mentioned, we're going to pick up from many vendors and we're going to drop off to many customers. And we're going to do this in this particular example with 21 vendors, 32 customers, and just hypothetically, for a nice round number, we're going to say it was $2,400 in total orders. I got some maps on the side, and you can sort of walk you through this 21 vendors, 32 customers. The first slide at the top right is actually going to show a pickup route. So we've simplified this example. We're going to have one driver with a large van just simply drive around the whole region and pick up all the food in the morning. We're then going to have them meet at a transfer point, and we'll talk a bit more about transfer points later. And we're going to have that be divided up into two vehicles, that one is then going to deliver basically in the west, and another is going to deliver in the east of the region. So taking this approach, of course, seems pretty straightforward when you only have 32 customers. And we can see even at this small scale, actually the economics work here. If you're trying to do this as your own on a farmer, not so much. But because we're able to actually basically pick up from the 21 different vendors, those 21 different vendors are sharing these costs. So we actually have revenue left over at the end to actually run the business. So it's important to note this example is far from optimized. We've kept it really simple to demonstrate it here. So some key things would be more drivers with shorter shifts would actually allow us to bring down the costs further, and more transfer points. But the more transfer points you have, the more difficult the ideal solution is to actually solve. And finally, we do want to consider drop-offs along pickup routes, and that's going to be part of the next slide here actually. So our optimization objectives. So we've got to minimize total driver time as our ultimate objective. We've looked at a lot of different metrics that we could, that would be obvious, for example, number of kilometers or miles, right? Minimizing number of transfer points, etc. But at the end of the day, we can only basically set up the algorithm to solve and optimize for one key outcome with one secondary. So we're going to minimize the total driver time as our primary objective, because it does have the overall largest impact on the costs. Then minimizing the visits to the farms and vendors as a secondary objective is important. As we said earlier, and it's our first constraint in this list too, is that each customer receives all orders together by only one driver. And that's really important for the customer experience and the convenience factor. But on the farm vendor side, we don't want to have 100 drivers showing up for 100 orders. That's not going to be the experience the farm wants either. That's going to raise their costs when they have a lot more work to do, because each of those individual collections of orders for each pickup have to be grouped together, and the more of them there are, the more work it is in total. So we've got to be able to minimize that as well. So then we've got a few other constraints. Of course, each driver, the optimal solution may be to have one driver working 12 hours, but that's not going to work. But at the same time, each driver wants to be guaranteed a minimum number of hours for this to be worth their while as well. So we may be having a minimum of 6 hours and a maximum of 10, for example. We also have vehicle capacity, and that vehicle capacity is not a static inventory of load it up and then dump it off, because we actually are able to drop off and then pick up again later. And when you consider that dynamic aspect of the vehicle capacity, because we had these early wins, we call them, of dropping off as early as possible to optimize the capacity, it makes it a very fluid number that has a big impact on the potential routes. And then, of course, the transfer points are there to optimize the total time. They are really key. But these transfer points, of course, every single time you add a transfer point, it becomes more complicated in order to align the schedules of the drivers and not be actually increasing total driver time because you have drivers waiting around for the other driver to arrive. So the dynamics there of these constraints make this problem really, really tough mathematically to solve. So now we've taken a look at a really simplistic example, but scaling wise, what happens when you have over 100 locations? So I've got 100 locations here of potential real world places that you could actually do your pickups and drop-offs from here. So now try imagining just a few drivers and how you would actually divide up all of those routes. It becomes a lot more difficult when you start to actually scale this, but that's even just the tip of the iceberg. Now imagine that we have just 5% of households in this region. That's 6,000 stops here. What would this map look like? And how would you organize all of those routes? What happens that with our business model as well is our order cutoff is at noon the day before delivery. And the vendors and the farmers want to be able to have all of their information ready to go for the next morning when pickups can start. So we have to have in only a 3-hour window all of the logistics sorted out for all of these different drivers, pickups, and have all of the notification emails off to the vendors and the consumers and the commercial buyers for that matter too. So when you have that narrow 3-hour window, this optimization problem becomes even more difficult because what your solution entails is a very narrow 1-hour window, because we have to have time on either side of that to deal with last minute changes, issues that came up, and then after the optimization is done, finding out we've got other changes or issues to deal with as well. And then we need time to actually deal with follow-ups. So we've basically come to the conclusion we have to be able to run this massive optimization algorithm and have the whole thing done in under an hour. So what we've learned working with D-Wave and third parties here is certainly something that really aligned with the expectations, thankfully, when we set out with this project to begin with. The first thing is that we validated that DFS's delivery problem, which includes transfer points and all these other constraints we've talked about, is significantly harder than more standard vehicle routing problems. But all of those constraints are what actually make the business model work. So they are critical, and we can't just ignore them or simplify this. Meanwhile, studying the literature and taking a look at existing tools, open source and otherwise, using purely classical resources, we have easily seen that the scale is much below where DFS needs to scale to. And therefore, we do need some other solution here. And thankfully, we were able to work with D-Wave, and we were able to formulate the problem. We were able to work with them on the constraints here and mathematically express those, optimize the outcome targeting, and using their LEAP platform, we're able to mathematically show a capacity for 300 plus drivers on what was their current generation hardware a few months ago. Of course, we're absolutely ecstatic with the announcements this morning here, and of course looking forward to the next generation hardware to show that we'll be able to go well beyond 300 drivers. So, in conclusion, thank you, D-Wave, of course. This has been an excellent project to work with you and your team on. Your team has been very professional, and it has been an amazing experience working with you, and our team, of course, has enjoyed that across the board. So, of course, we're happy to talk to any of you. If you have any questions, please do reach out in the comments. Jill from our team here is happy to answer those, but also very happy to take any of those conversations offline to continue the discussions. Thank you again.